In dating, what profession would be a deal breaker for you and why? Story 1. Lawyer. I am a lawyer. I know lots of lawyers who are married to other lawyers and I don't get it. Being in a relationship with another type of person who also likes to hear themselves talk and also has to be right about everything all the time is fucking exhausting. Story 2. The kind of professional athlete that is on the road 10 months out of the year. Edit. I'm not super needy, but I personally need to have my SO's undivided attention and not share them with any aspect of their career for at least one day. Those are just my needs. Someone else will probably find that arrangement suits them. Story 3. Based on feedback from women on various Facebook groups about dating, I would say cops, surgeons, and lawyers. You would think these are good vocations, but they are full of control freaks and cheaters. Story 4. Realtor. I've worked with hundreds. Architect. Number that were competent and actually fully represented their clients' interests? 1. And that was kind of a special situation. The low barrier to entry, high failure rate, and high incentives for bad behavior with a low risk of punishment pretty much means that even someone with good intentions is going to have to round some corners on the regular. Story 5. I want my partner to have a job that they feel fulfilled by, and that is a positive in their life. I would prefer not to have a community response partner. Emergency services, disaster response, police, etc. I want to know that my wife and kids are safe when things are going down, not having her run headfirst towards the danger. Story 6. Doctor, police officer, military, firefighters, or any other profession where you're exposed to high stress and witness the worst sides of humanity. I don't know if I could handle being an emotional support for someone with such a job. Story 7. My best friend is a doctor and he's repeatedly warned me never to date a nurse. They apparently cheat a ton. I guess it kind of makes sense though. If you're dealing with death all day, you gotta celebrate life every chance you get. Story 8. Cop for sure, even as a man. There's no way I'm taking the 42% chance that I marry an abusive monster who's trained in the use of violence that the local department will inevitably be hell-bent on shielding from their day in court. Not a motherfucking chance. Story 9. If they have a job doing remote therapy. It may seem too specific, but I've met a number of girls doing this job recently, and they were some of the most unstable individuals I've ever met. They don't actually have a degree in anything to do that job. It's the place where crazy women go when they want to indulge their mental health hobby. If you ever get your kids online therapy, you really need to pay attention to who you're hiring. I've known 2 women who were genuinely dangerously insane that were mentoring kids on their mental health, despite having no control over their own. Story 10. I think the only ones that would be a deal breaker are ones that directly oppose my values. Minister, priest, conservative talk radio host, conversion therapist, or anything overtly illegal like a heroin dealer. Story 11. Anything illegal. Do not need to be afraid for my life all the time or have the cops showing up saying my partner got arrested. Working in the pot business, this includes states where it's not illegal because I don't want to date a druggie or somebody who just smells like a 24/7. Working in anything which scams people even if it is legal, like pushing payday loans or anything else like that and knowing you're going to destroy a person's life and thinking it's absolutely funny. Story 12. I'm married, so not in the market, but imagining I would not stay long-term with someone like a debt collector, bailiff, i.e. repossession and seizure of assets, etc. If they were trying to get out of it, I could support that, though I wouldn't commit till they'd succeeded. People do get into bad things by drift, and there are poor people who are doing call center debt stuff because they lack options and have to feed their children. But if they thought it was okay, no, I'm not going to judge them, but I couldn't cope. I think I'd have difficulty with a police officer. Someone mentioned landlord. There are landlords and landlords. There are some good ones. I once, when young, rented part of a house from an old geezer. We got on well. He preferred to have lower rent and someone he could trust. I've known landlords who wrote off rent because a tenant was seriously ill, etc. But there are also lots of the other sort. My feeling is that it's better where there are personal connection. Perhaps the better sort doesn't count as profession, though. Story 13. Any entertainer or social media person, people who dance like a monkey for views, don't tend to have a strong set of morals or values. Feeding off attention does not help to develop healthy minds. Story 14. I worked with an AT&T debt collector. It wouldn't be a deal breaker in itself. We gotta do what we gotta do, but they were so proud of how good they had been at squeezing money out of people. Zero reflection. Couldn't date someone like that. Story 15. Football hockey player. Too many injuries. I know most love seeing them play, but it makes me so nervous for those young men who are on the field / in the rink. 200 plus LBS men jumping on you and tackling into you. I seriously get so sad when a game is on. To destroy and put so much stress on your body temple for entertainment just seems disturbed. And on top of that, only a little tiny handful of those men have status and actually make good money. I just couldn't deal with this morally. I wouldn't support your career, and that obviously would put a huge tear in a relationship. Story 16. Anyone in sales? Salespeople are dumb. I worked with a big group of them at my last job, and they're why I left. IDK that I could be with a doctor. The few I've met are pretty arrogant. Anyone working a low-wage job. I'd like to retire someday with my partner, and it would be nice if they also had retirement goals. Story 17. I agree with almost all of the things said here that I have seen, especially the criminal ones. But I figured I'd throw in my 2 cents and say what was for me personally a deal breaker, and that is sex workers. I know this isn't probably the most popular answer to this, but for my own personal reasons, I just couldn't handle this personally. Maybe I'm too traditional, IDK, but it's simply something I don't like, even if it is limited to photos. Story 18. There are 3 I could never date. Anyone involved in policing, medicine, and clergy. Police cannot be trusted, as they've made abundantly clear, and anyone working with them complicit in their shady dealing at best. Medicine and medical people are important for society, but I couldn't date someone like that. They're never home and tend to be obsessive in my experience, and 2 obsessives in a relationship never get anything done. And the clergy just exists to grift people out of money and control them. Story 19. I don't think whatever their current profession would be a deal breaker. Yeah, I would ask Roxanne to turn off the red light for us to have a future as couple, but I really think I would have been open to just about any profession when we first met. Full disclosure, my wife quit working at a job, became a full-time home-based caregiver while pregnant with our first child, and it wasn't until our youngest was a teenager that she went back to work at a part-time job. Story 20. Politician because the vast majority of them are terrible, greedy people. First responders because I don't want them facing possible death every time they walk out the door. Military because I'm not going months without seeing my partner. Any emotionally traumatizing job, CPS, 911 dispatcher, etc., BC therapy is expensive, and I don't want to deal with that. Any job with terrible hours, doctor, night shifts, etc., BC, I need some sort of stability and I don't want to have to sleep without my partner. Any job where part of your duties is putting money above people. I saw a post about a phone company trying to get a woman to upgrade her phone plan and do all the things when she's sobbing and trying to cancel her husband's plan BC he had just passed away. That's just so unethical. Story 21. Trucker. Specifically over the road. Semi-trucker, but local ones are on thin ice. Any trucker I've ever known was not a good person. Their health is shit, their hygiene is shit, and typically their personalities are shit, because when it comes to hiring prospects, most don't give a fuck who they're hiring as long as they show they know how to handle a semi. Source. My father is a convicted pedophile and still driving. I hope he fucking chokes. I was told my husband while we were dating and heading into those later dating years where we were becoming more serious and thinking about our future together. I flat out told him that if ever becomes a trucker, I'm leaving him. I refused to do it. Story 22. Military, cop, football player, spy. I grew up in a verbally abusive home and have been hit a few times. As a small woman, I don't fuck around with men in professions that involve violence and aggression. Also, as a very liberal person, I respect individual soldiers and understand that the recruitment system is predator and some people have no choice. My dad was a soldier and I was a military brat. I get it. But I do not want to marry someone involved in the military-industrial complex. I do not want my kids to grow up think militarization is normal like I did, and I don't think a soldier aligns enough with my personal values. 10-10 would be friends with some people in military careers, but wouldn't get to the point of dating. Also, the work-life balance is shit, and I couldn't commit to co-parenting in that situation. Story 23. Military. I'm not moving randomly. I'm not living on a base. I'm not going to worry about you cheating on me because it's such a rampant thing that it's a stereotype. I'm not going to raise these kids by myself. I respect the people that are able to do it, but I am not one of those people. Story 24. Anything in a restaurant. Dishwashing and prep cook are entry-level things and historically not stable jobs. Line cooks are almost always addicted to something and are generally miserable people because of the high-stress environment. I've never known hosts, wait staff who didn't complain about their job with every breath. Management has to work atrocious hours. Plus, restaurant work is notorious for it being a sexual free-for-all among employees. Just bad no matter what. Story 25. When I was a big law lawyer, My own profession was a deal breaker. Now I am in a new country, no longer in that life. But if I go back to that life, that deal breaker will come back. Don't think two people in big law make for a good couple. Also a deal breaker in the US. Any profession in the weapons industry, Lockheed Martin, Elbit type cause, DoD, military contractor, unless the person is sufficiently critical of the harm caused by the industry in the world, and is actively trying to either get out or make things better within the system, and is deeply committed to it. Story 26 sounds dumb, but someone who works weekends. For whatever reasons, my first few serious relationships were with guys who regularly worked on weekends. One was in the restaurant business, one worked in the trades, and the other was a doctor. Then, I met my husband, who worked a straight 9-5 job with very occasional travel, that he usually knew about a couple of months in advance. I also worked a standard 9-5-ish job, so our hours were very similar. Honestly, it was so nice to be able to see each other regularly on weekends, especially because we didn't really live super close to each other, so it wasn't like it was easy to pop by during the week. We actually got to go away for weekends pretty frequently and were able to spend a lot of time together regularly, not just here and there as I had in my prior relationships. It's no wonder I married the guy. That said, even if it didn't work out, I don't know that I'd date someone who regularly worked weekends having done it 3 times. I haven't and likely never will work weekends, and it just kind of makes things difficult, IMO. Story 27, construction worker, landscaper. My dad has done construction his entire life, and I couldn't deal with the stress of my partner not having work in the winter and needing to file for unemployment. It's also extremely hard on the body. My dad has terrible hearing and he'll need to get both of his knees done in the couple years, and he's only 61. I just know where the road goes and don't want to go down it. Story 28. I once dated a guy in private equity. Absolute disaster. Everything was always related to work. He thought he was better than everyone else because he made more money. He was a complete control freak, a narcissist, and a manipulator. He thought that capitalism was the best system in the world. He legitimately believed that homeless people dying on the street was acceptable and that they should have just worked harder. He would proudly tell me about how he was going to screw people out of jobs to get a bigger bonus. When asked about how it would affect those people's lives, his response was that they should have chosen a better career path. Story 29. My parents' friend is married to a woman whose job is to oversee animal testing facilities and make sure the animal testing is being conducted correctly by their standards. She's a nice enough lady on the surface, but I genuinely couldn't imagine crawling into bed at night with a woman who helps make sure animals get tortured correctly by cosmetics companies. She makes fat stacks, but I have to assume she's dead inside to be able to do that job. So anyone who works in animal testing is my answer. Story 30, police officer. Putting aside all the systemic harm that profession does here in the United States, I don't want to join the 40% of self-reported victims of domestic violence. Cops are so emotionally handicapped and violent that they self-report 40% of them participating in domestic violence. And they are so damn dumb that they report behaving this way themselves. Also noteworthy that 40% is self-reported. You think there might be a few extra who did not report their crimes? I'm already at a statistically increased chance of being harassed and assaulted by this group who is well documented for harassing and assaulting citizens randomly in the streets. No chance in hell would I invite one into my home or my sheets. Story 31. When I was really young, a cop wanted to go out with me. The assistant manager where I worked said, "You can't go out with that guy. No way in hell." Me. Why? Assistant manager, because cops beat the shit out of their wives. I never forgot that. Fast forward 4 years, I was working somewhere else, and the owner of the business wanted to set me up with a friend of his who was a professional football player. I went for a massage and told my masseuse. He said, "You can't go out with him. I work on half of those guys and they're all whores." I never forgot that either. Just 2 years ago, I worked with a woman who was the ex-wife of a pro football player, and she learned that the hard way. She was friends with another woman who had also been married to a player on the same team, and left her husband when she found out he had sex with another woman on their wedding day. Story 32, prison guard. My city is noted for its large number of prisons, so I know my fair share of correctional officers. The job changes people, and not for the better. I can kind of see why they see the worst of people, but it colors their perception of all people, those on the outside world. Most are angry, bitter, and distrustful. A lot suffer from PSTD and CPSTD. Story 33. Anything blue-collar for the most part. and anything military law enforcement related. There's a specific type of personality and political alignment, though I know you can find that in any industry. Blue-collar law enforcement has a violent tendency that I just don't mesh with at all. Hard pass on weirdo Republicans and violent, complacent, or outright white supremacy.